All right, everyone, here I am. And, okay, so we are going to talk about strategy instruction and direct instruction a little bit today. So McCutcheon proposed in 1996 that younger students minimize the role of planning, revising, and other strategic processes involved in writing because the act of transcribing text is so effortful for them. So what does this sound like? I want you to ask yourself. It sounds to me he is saying is that students lack the basic skills. And because they lack the basic skills and the basic skills of just writing down text, writing the words down, which requires knowledge of what the letters should look like, how to write those letters, and it also would require thinking about how to spell the letters. Those sort of things are so effortful for them that instead of spending time on planning and revising and other strategic processes, they are having to spend time on those basic skills, and those basic skills are too effortful for them. So a primary goal of education should therefore be to provide students with numerous opportunities to practice fundamental procedures such as decoding, computing basic facts, in order to limit the cognitive demands of performing basic skills. So this just goes back to what I have been saying over and over and over and over again in class, is the importance of training students in those basic skills, those fundamental basic skills, to a level of fluency so that they can build upon those skills and engage in more cognitively demanding tasks. But even the most skilled readers, however, come across unfamiliar words that require effortful and planful processing to read. Alexander and Murphy describe such effortful and planning processing in which individuals employ general or domain-specific procedures as strategical processing. So even those skilled readers who can read all those words, it still requires, whenever we are reading text and doing other things, that we are planful in what we're doing. Whenever you are, reading a really difficult science text, you have to think about what you're doing and how you're going to make comprehension of what you're reading, and how you're going to study and input that information into your brain. So you have to be, or if you don't do this at this point, you would benefit from taking some time and effort to be planful in how you're going to read stuff instead of just jumping into it. So at the 1996 and 97 annual conference of the American Educational Research Association, special symposium were conducted on the themes of strategies and their role in education. And 2 points of agreement were um, 2 points of agreement came across from that symposia. And the AERA it's not like other conferences where you go to where you might have a lot of people who very much agree on the topics of conversation. AERA is composed of people from all walks of life, or all walks of research life, I should say. Some which we might not consider real research, but those people who are doing it consider it to be real research. And there's just a lot of varying ideas about how instruction and reading should be provided, and instruction in all kinds of areas should be provided to students. But they agreed on two things: that there were too many unanswered questions regarding teaching students how to use strategies, or how to employ strategies. That in order to succeed both in and out of school, along with basic skills, individuals need to learn strategies. So I think those are pretty basic things that they came to agreement on. One is that we don't know enough about how to teach strategies, and secondly, that students do need to know basic skills, but they also need to learn strategies. So similar to basic skills, now this was not agreed on at the AERA. This is just kind of moving on into some of my own thoughts, as well as research in reading and other areas, reading, writing, math, kind of the basic areas, conducted with sort of a strategy instruction, as well as applied behavior analysis, all kinds of various philosophies or fields of research. So similar to basic skills, students learn and then perform strategies better when they are explicitly taught and supported by their environment and rewarded. Okay, so again, these are statements that you've heard me say over and over again, right? So explicitly taught, the more students who have Learning problems require a greater level of explicitness, but all students are going to be able to learn when information is explicitly taught. Whenever we are showing students what we are expecting them to learn, and whenever we make the stimuli to which they are responding very clear and explicit. So students learn better whenever we use explicit instruction. Also, whenever they're supported by their environment. So whenever instruction is not just occurring in the classroom, but we have generalization of that instruction. So instructions occurring across settings. And people are supporting that instruction. So we're providing good modeling. We're providing good performance feedback. That's kind of all the ideas, support all the ideas in that statement of supported by their environment. And finally, that they are rewarded. Whenever behaviors that kids are engaged in, strategies that kids are engaged in, whenever the correct strategies are rewarded, kids are more likely to engage in those strategies. We engage in behaviors for which we are rewarded for. We do not engage in behaviors that are not rewarded. So we're going to talk about sort of two different curriculums today. And one is strategy instruction, and it's kind of a broad-based curriculum. There's strategy instruction in reading, writing, and math. And there might be some in some other areas as well. But strategy instruction is kind of like a term that we use to describe a certain curriculums. And they have some common characteristics across the strategy instruction curriculums. After we talk about strategy instruction, we will talk about direct instruction. So for strategy instruction, some common areas, components across strategy instruction and curriculums. They provide students with needed background information or knowledge. They explain the strategy to students, and then they model the use of the strategy being taught and explain to students why the strategy should be used. Okay, so it's providing to students the background information, making sure that they have the background knowledge that they need in order to be able to perform the strategy. If they lack the background knowledge, they won't be able to do the strategy. They lack the prerequisite skills. So we provide them with the necessary background knowledge that they need in order to engage in the strategy. Now, it's not always necessary that students that we need to always have the basic skills mastered, but there's sometimes background knowledge that you might not have that information mastered, but you need to have that information available to you. So you know that the Eiffel Tower is in Paris. Well, you might not remember that in 5 weeks from now, but whenever reading the story, if you need the information, the background knowledge that the Eiffel Tower is in Paris, that information should be provided to students beforehand. You also, so then they explain the strategy to students. You explain to them how you tell them how to do it, tell the students how to do this strategy, and then you model the strategy to the students. And then explain to the students why the strategy should actually be used. So you give them a reason for using it, which in a sense tells them, okay, you use this strategy, and then reinforcement is going to be provided. You're going to be able to understand what you're doing better. You're going to be able to understand what you're reading. This is how you connect text, and connecting text allows you to make better comprehension of what you're reading. So you explain the benefits, essentially, of those strategies. Self-regulated strategy development involves explaining to students how good writers might use a strategy, so planning, listing main idea points, and then the benefits of using that strategy. Teachers then model the strategy for students by writing essays while asking themselves, so the teachers are asking themselves questions aloud as a way of modeling the strategy. So we want students to be asking themselves these questions while writing and thinking about these steps. So therefore, the teachers are actually modeling that behavior while they are writing the essay, because that's what we want students to do afterwards. After finishing modeling the essays, teachers then model self-instruction procedures. So the self-instruction procedures involve self-evaluation and self-reinforcement. So asking themselves, did I do this? Did I do this? Did I do the proper planning? Did I list the main ideas? Okay, I listed those main ideas. Now let's see if I incorporated those main ideas in the story. So you're self-evaluating whether or not you incorporated. Oh wow, I really did list those main ideas. I planned it and included the main ideas. My story really makes sense. It flows in the proper order, and it includes all the ideas that I was I was intending to produce or provide to the reader, to the next reader. So that's sort of giving self-reinforcement to the student. The second component, which are common across SI curriculums, is providing students with opportunities to practice problems that increase in complexity while they function as a scaffold for students while they are learning to use the skill independently. So just as whenever we're working with other basic skills, we start off with the easy examples and we move to increasingly complex tasks. Do we move to more complex tasks before they've mastered and done well with the easier tasks? No, we don't. We make sure that the students are able to do the easier task before we increase the levels of complexity that we are asking of them. We also provide scaffolding. Now, scaffolding is a term that we hear or see a lot whenever we talk about strategy instruction. Essentially what scaffolding is providing different levels of assistance. So do we provide hand over hand, and then do we just do oh gosh, I'm blanking out of the name, whenever we just kind of do close proximity? So it's kind of talking about what level of assistance are we providing the students in order to be able to make sure that they're able to complete the skill or complete the task accurately, perform the task accurately, be able to properly use the strategy. We provide more at the beginning, and then as the student is able to perform the task by themselves, or increasingly by themselves, then we're removing the level of effort or the level of assistance that we are providing to the students. The teachers provide students with corrective feedback and reinforcement. So we have many models of strategy instruction involve allowing students to practice skills collaboratively. So we should be pairing students up who, one student who has stronger skills than the other students, so they're able to provide some modeling to the lower performing students. Providing that modeling to students helps the stronger student as well as helps the lower performing students. Collaborative practice also enables teachers to support students while gradually providing them with greater independence. So while you have peers working together, then at the same time, the teacher can be moving around the classroom and helping out students, or pulling the students to her desk to see how they are doing individually and getting them to be able to provide some individual work to the students. So there's a lot of research out there on collaborative work between students. Whenever we do that work, there's some of you all who are looking at peer assisted learning strategies, PALS, or peer tutoring, form of peer tutoring. And across those strategies, what we find to be really important is that we actually teach the students how to engage in the peer tutoring. We don't just let them guess how to do it or figure it out on their own. We actually teach kids how to do it. Likewise, if we were having collaborative practice with strategy instruction, we would want to teach students how to engage in the collaborative practices. But through collaborative practice, you have a stronger student who's helping a younger student. There is good research showing that whenever we know that we're going to have to teach a skill to other students or other individuals, that we actually learn that material better than if we're told that we have to study the material for a test. And it also causes or requires the stronger student to verbalize what they're doing, which is a very good strategy. So to foster independence and generalization of these strategies, the students are provided with mnemonics for remembering the steps to strategies, as well as self-monitoring and our prompt cards. So whenever you go into a classroom that is using strategy instruction, you will find those mnemonics pasted on or not pasted, but posted somewhere in the classroom to make sure that students have easy access to those mnemonics. And ideally, we teach the mnemonics so whenever they go into another classroom, they can also use it. But the teachers are constantly reinforcing students' use of the mnemonics. Those mnemonics also sort of serve as a prompt cards or a way to self-monitor. So, each part of the mnemonic, each letter of the acronym, the student can go through those and sort of check off, did I do this step? Did I do this step? Did I do this next step? So we have efforts to promote generalization, and adaptation of strategies also include providing students with opportunities to practice a strategy using varying types of materials. So in schools that are doing really good jobs doing strategy instruction, it's not in writing, it's not just the writing teacher or the English language arts teacher who's providing or teaching strategy instruction. Strategy instruction is also being taught by the science and social studies teacher. So those mnemonics are also posted in those other classrooms. And then whenever the teacher's going around, the teachers from the other subject areas are going around, that teacher is making sure that the students are using these strategies across the settings. So we really promote these strategies. Training of students in self-regulatory behavior, so self-monitoring, self-recording, self-assessment, self-reinforcement, results in allows teachers to meet with students individually to teach these skills, or requires teachers to meet with students individually to teach these skills. They review their prior work. The teachers set goals for students, and this is what you're going to do next time you work with me. So sometimes our goals might be you're going to increase the number of adjectives that you are including in your story. And so we're actually going to make counts of that and make sure, set goals of how many more adjectives you're going to use. Or you're going to make a more detailed outline. You compare today's outline to the next outline. So different goals we can set, and we can set those goals for individual students based upon what their current level of performance is. And we explain to the benefits of self-regulatory behavior to the students. Teaching students self-regulatory behaviors has been shown to increase students' understanding of their academic abilities, which enables them to make a connection between the use of the strategies and their successful performance. So ideally, they are monitoring their performance, they're seeing that they're meeting their goals, and whenever they see they're meeting their goals, they're also seeing that they're performing better, that their stories maybe are longer, their stories are more detailed, they're more interesting, and so forth. So just by doing that, because being successful on text or test or performing and writing and so forth is hopefully a conditioned reinforcement, right? It's a problem completion, but completing problems successfully gets reinforced by kids whenever they are younger. So continued um, accurate performance and better performance should ideally be conditioned, and students are going to be happy with themselves whenever they do a better job than they were doing before. So if we ingrain that in students by reinforcing accurate performance of early basic skills, whenever we start getting to these types of strategies, which are more difficult and more complex, and we teach them self-regulatory behaviors, those behaviors and increasing performance, increasing the quality of their work, and them being able to see that they've made those increases should be reinforcing for them. Um, then the other thing is, as they engage in these skills, and we work from easier strategies and to more complex, just as with basic skills, the easier strategies and lower levels of performance that we require become ingrained in them, and they're able to engage in those behaviors without thinking about it. So, we think about reading, for instance, and at some point you were hopefully told that you should pay attention to bold-faced words in the text. And at first, whenever you were doing that, you probably had to think about it, or teachers were pointing that out whenever reading stories in the class. So, like, here's a bold-faced word. The bold-faced word usually means that there's going to be a vocabulary information afterwards, or it's going to be really important. You need to understand this word to understand the rest of the story. So you really spent time on that word. Now, while you might not realize you do that, you are more than likely spending more time on those parts of the text that provide definitions to those vocabulary words, to those bold-faced words. You also, what we find is skilled readers spend more time on headings. So you are ideally, whenever you're seeing headings in the text, you're actually reading those texts, and you're kind of slowing down because you're thinking about, okay, well, this heading is giving me information about what I'm about to read below here. So I need to make sure that whenever I'm finished reading this paragraph, that I understand why they put that heading there. I understand the importance of that heading. So those are some skills that we should be teaching students, strategies that we should be teaching students while they are reading, that by doing training and working with the kids, they start doing that naturally without having to think about it. So what I would like you to do is I have three different three different links here that I would like you to go to and look at. So the first one is on self-regulated strategy development for writing, and it's a lady doing a presentation on it. It's a long presentation, but all I want you to watch is from 10 minutes and 40 seconds to 14 minutes and 40 seconds. And then the next one is a teacher who is only, I guess, maybe a 6-minute video, and she's providing instruction to a group of students on question-answer relationship. And I want you to see how she is basically modeling for the students how to do this, while at the same time, asking questions and getting students to provide responses. So she's not just in that first initial modeling part of it, but she's still providing quite a bit of, she still is providing modeling and direction for students in doing it, and pointing out the various components, as well as the benefits of doing these different, having the question part, having the answering, and having and picking out those relationships. Then I want you to look at the next one, which is I think it's maybe 8 or 9 minute video, but you only need to watch from 0 to 5 minutes and 45 seconds. And I want you to attend to how the teacher points out the different types of questions that the students are going to have to answer, how the teacher connects different parts of the text to each other, and how she helps to understand the order, how she helps students to understand the order of the text. Okay, so now we're going to move on to direct instruction. There is an extensive body of literature supporting evidence behind direct instruction. Is probably the most evidence-based curriculum that exists out there, and for good reasons. So again, we're going to kind of talk about some of the guiding principles or components, consistent components of direct instruction. But then at the end, I have some videos that I would like you to watch. Now, I want you to be aware of, there is sort of the, people talk about the big DI and the little DI. Big DI is sort of the curriculums that are out there. So direct instructions curriculums that are out there, with SRA being probably being the biggest, or maybe it might be the only, but the only true big D, big I. But then, and with that direct instruction SRA, it really follows these components that we're talking about. There are other people who will say, oh, I'm using direct instruction. And whenever they're saying they're using direct instruction, it's maybe watered down direct instructions. Maybe they are using some written text, but it may be more so that they are just using some of the other components where it's very high levels of explicit instruction. So sometimes little d, little I call it, or other people call it, is more just people providing very good explicit instruction. Whereas big D, big I, which what we're going to be talking about next, is also extremely explicit instruction, but it's actually a curriculum. So it's a set out curriculum that schools can purchase and use with their students, and for which there is an extensive amount of evidence base supporting its use for teaching all students, but especially struggling students. The guiding principle of direct instruction is that failure of a student to learn is the function of inappropriate teaching or curriculum rather than characteristics of the students. So the goal of direct instruction is to develop whenever they came up with this, was to develop a curriculum that enabled students who many believe could not learn to read to learn at a pace that would allow them to catch up to their non-disabled peers. So common characteristics of direct instruction: the first is students' performance dictates where in the direct instruction curriculum instruction actually begins. So you assess what skills a student has, and the skills that a student has determines where in the direct instruction curriculum they are going to start. We're not going to start at a level where they are lacking the prerequisite skills. We're not going to start at a part in the curriculum where they already have the skills necessary to do everything that you're presenting to them. So we're starting all students off at the right level for them. The second component is that the lessons are streamlined. They did research and analysis to determine what are the skills that we need to provide students so that they can learn to read as quickly as possible. So what skills are required to be able to start reading as soon as possible? So that meant, one of the questions asked, do students need to be able to know their letter names in order to be able to read? The answer is no. So they didn't teach letter names to begin with. The other question was like, what are the letter sounds that are, represented most often in literature, in children's literature, or in children's reading? So let's teach those letter sounds before we teach other letter sounds. So lessons are streamlined. Extensive effort is placed into organized direct instruction lessons into logical developmental sequences so that students know the rules, strategies, concepts, and operations that they need to know in order to learn what is being taught in each lesson. So we look at a lesson, or they would look at a lesson, they break down that lesson into its individual tasks, individual skill needs, and make sure that if I'm teaching, skill 8, required skill 8 of this sequence, that they already have skills 1 through 7. So we don't teach a skill 8 until we have skills 1 through 7 taught. Concept, strategies, and rules that are taught are generalizable, enabling students to apply what they learn not only to individual items used as examples, but to the widest array of new items and situations. So by teaching those skills that have the greatest generalization, we are able to move kids to learning more and more materials as quickly as possible. Students are shown sets of items that consist of examples and non-examples in a predetermined sequence that allows students to easily recognize the differences. So everything is thought out and planned. The curriculum is drawn out perfectly to make sure we have a great sequence, a sequence that makes the most sense, where students are going to be able to answer questions correctly, the highest probability of answering questions correctly, because they have all the prerequisite skills necessary. Lessons are also taught as a brisk pace and are developed to provide students with more learning opportunities than typical instruction is. So we are constantly asking group level questions, and it's also taught at a brisk pace. So signals are given, and signals are given so that all students know when they need to respond. So in a typical classroom where you have a teacher ask a questions, and students sometimes know that sometimes they're going to be answering quarterly and sometimes they're not. Whenever you do direct instruction lessons, the teachers are actually using cues, so hand signals, to let students know what they're going to have to do. So before the teacher's even asking the question, students know if this is going to be, I think it's before they ask the question, students know, is this going to be a group response or an individual response? It must be like right when the question's being asked. So that makes sure every student is actually going to attend to the question and the response. So tons of learning opportunities are in there. A lot of people think that because all the basically the words, the instructions, directions that teachers are given are all written out for them, that it's sort of taken out is going to be boring for teachers. But in order to do these things at a brisk pace, you have to be so well versed at it, and you have to be so active and engaged that it actually requires a lot of energy for teachers to provide quality direct instruction lessons, because they're moving through this information so quickly and engaging with students so often. And because you're doing that, because you're always using, is another reason why we have common language, is because with that common language, it allows us to move through the curriculum at a faster pace, because there's never any confusion about what the teacher is expecting. Or there's never any confusion about the language that she's used, because they've been taught that language before. So the format of instruction is also consistent across lessons. A model, lead, test, delayed test model is used. So as students become more proficient in performing a skill or strategy, the format of instruction systematically changes. The teacher's role as a source of information decreases, the teacher's prompts decrease, and the teacher corrective feedback fades from being immediate to delayed, and problems increase in complexity. So this is another way of basically saying scaffolded instruction. But I think with the direct instruction, because things are scripted out and we only move to the next lesson and the next part until the kid's ready, the teacher, when we're going to move some of that scaffolding away is a little bit clearer. And it's also the way direct instruction curriculums are written, we are collecting data and then we're told how to collect those data so that we know if the kid is in fact ready to move to the next level. With strategy instruction, although that scaffolding information is there and we want teachers to essentially do the same thing, the criteria for moving students to those next levels is not as clearly specified. So there's a lot more subjectivity available in, or not available, a lot more subjectivity in the process with strategy instruction as composed to with direct instruction. Okay, so I have this kind of what I want to provide you on direct instruction. What I need you to do now is you need to go to this website, and there are 2 different videos, each about 4 or so minutes long, and I want you to watch the one that's called "What is Direct Instruction?" and then also watch the little video that's called "What Directions Are Included in the Teacher Presentation Books." You should be taking notes whenever you watch this one, as well as also whenever you watch the strategy instruction when you should have taken notes. Or and then I want you to answer the question of what components discussed in those 2 videos you're watching here are consistent with what Daly, Martins, Witt, and Olson say is needed for providing effective instruction in the classroom setting. And that is all we have for this video. The next video I'm going to make for you all, well, is going to be on your exam.